Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and screen share really quickly, and then we'll get started.
Okay, great. So we just wanted to, one second, wait for it to load. Wanted to welcome everyone to our first meeting. And if you have any questions throughout like the presentation or the interview portion, just drop them in chat and we'll answer them all during the Q&A portion.
So we're going to start by getting a quick intro from Polygence, who are our speakers today to kick off our very first ESC meeting. So we're super excited to hear from them. After we hear from Polygence about their company and their brand mission and all of that kind of stuff, we're going to go into a little interview portion. And while we're doing the interview portion, we ask that you guys comment any questions that you have in the chat. And then we'll make sure to go through those questions in the Q&A portion at the very end. So with that, I'll give the floor to Polygence.
Cool. So hi everyone, my name is Jin and I'm a co-founder at Polygence along with my other co-founder Janusz. So in a nutshell, what is Polygence? Polygence is an online research mentorship academy and we are in love with project-based learning here. So what we do is we pair motivated, intellectually curious students like yourselves with expert PhD level mentors to work on uniquely tailor-made research projects tailored to your own interests and needs. And if you go to the next slide, to tell you a little bit more about who we are. So I'm Jin, I'm actually originally from Hong Kong, came to the US for college, went to Princeton, and now I'm doing my PhD at Stanford in comparative literature.
Hi everyone, my name is Janusz, and prior to working on this company, I was a quantum physicist. I did a PhD in quantum physics at MIT, and prior to that, I did applied mathematics.
And next slide.
Yeah, so just to give you a brief overview of how we got started, because we are at the Entrepreneurship Club, so I'm sure you all want to know what it takes to even just get off the ground. So we had our initial conversation about this company in February 2019, and we felt that this was an important enough problem that we wanted to explore it further. So we incorporated in April 2019 and launched in June 2019. So we had our first students then, and it grew from just a couple of students to hundreds of students and mentors and projects, including some from Nueva. And recently we had to double the team size to kind of be able to continue to grow.
Next slide. So who are our mentors and who are our students? To give you a brief idea, our mentors come from some of the US's top universities. For example, we have Deborah, who finished her MD from Duke and did her BA at Yale. And she's actually a researcher in neuroscience in particular and just biology in general. We have someone like Kevin, who actually went to Princeton with me and then went on to do a master's at Oxford in philosophy and then is now at Yale doing his law degree. And so he's mentoring students in law, in policy, in philosophy, etc. And we also have someone really cool like Sarah, who is actually an archaeologist. She recently finished her PhD at Harvard and has taught just ancient Greek and Rome history and archaeology and languages throughout her career. And in terms of who our students are, they're really just intellectually curious students from all around the world. We have students from the Bay Area, from Hong Kong, from China, from Seoul, from Philippines, from Venezuela. And really the sky's the limit as long as you are someone who is curious about something, as long as you're an independent learner, we welcome students to apply and to do projects with us. And next slide.
So we are a technology company. So in order to accommodate so many projects from so many different parts of the world, we had to build a tech platform where mentors can sign up and create profiles and students can apply, and eventually we can put students and mentors in touch. And then we also have a lot of features which are geared towards managing these projects and making sure that they are all successful. So yeah, if you could go to the next slide.
So I wanted to give sort of some examples of what kinds of projects our students have done in the past in this brief introduction. So one example is one of our students worked with a mentor, Dora, who is a Google AI research intern and also who is a PhD candidate at Stanford in computational linguistics. And together they were answering the research question of how are presidential Democratic Party presidential candidates linguistically framed in the news and in the media. And so together they wrote a paper that was then accepted at ACL, which is the top computational linguistics conference. And they actually presented this paper back in July, as well as got their paper published in the conference proceedings. And so this would be an example of, you know, a project in computer science and in intersection with linguistics that ended up, you know, getting published and getting a lot of really great reviews. And then if you go to the next slide.
So here in this project, the student was working with a Stanford PhD who is a computational biologist and data scientist, and they were using stochastic methods to simulate the spread of COVID-19 in communities. In particular, they tried to answer the question, how does herd immunity affect the spread of the disease? What happens if 10% of the people get it? And what happens if you use vaccines on like 70% or 80 or 90% of the population? And they wrote a 20-page research paper that was recently submitted for publication, and we are eagerly waiting for it to come out.
And in addition to STEM and social sciences, we also have really cool and robust humanities projects. So in this example, the student is working with Anna, who recently finished her law degree from Yale and also went to Princeton for undergrad. And the student is working on his own blog series, sort of analyzing and discussing different issues in privacy law in the age of social media, as well as sort of big tech law breaches of privacy law, especially in California. And some of his articles have been picked up by his school's newspaper and also locally, which has been really exciting for everyone. And next slide. So this is something that we'll actually be answering in one of the questions anyway, so we'll just skip this for now. And yeah, last, just wanted to leave you guys with some of our social media handles, as well as my personal email, if any of you want to connect and talk more about either entrepreneurship or Polygence. And we're really excited to answer any questions you guys might have. Oh, we can't hear you, Miana.
I'm so sorry, I was on mute. Thank you so much. That was a really informative session, and I'm super excited to go into the Q&A as well and hear about like what the students are curious about in terms of what you guys have worked on. But the next section that we want to go into is our interview portion. So we're going to be asking Jin and Janos some questions around how they became entrepreneurs.
Okay, so like our first question is, how did you come up with the idea for Polygence?
Yeah, this is a really great question. So as Janos mentioned, we had our conversation back in April, February 2019. And actually, Janos and I have been friends for a while now because Janos's wife is one of my best friends from Princeton, actually. And we ended up coming to Stanford together to do our PhDs. And so after Janos finished his PhD, he moved into our house. So we just became housemates and really close friends. So as housemates do, we had dinner together and we were just talking about, you know, as international students in the US, how in the world did we get to where we are now? And how did we really fall in love with learning and with teaching? And then we realized that mentorship was really the key. We had amazing professors, teachers who went out of their way to nurture us, to give us extra projects on the side. And then we realized, hey, like project-based learning and mentorship, if we could put those two together and give access to that to students all around the world, that could be really powerful. And so it was really at that dinner table conversation where we had that idea, and then we just took it and ran with it.
That is really inspiring. It's super cool to hear about how you guys cultivated that idea, so thank you. Our next question, we want you to walk us through the process of the initial steps of creating Polygence.
So for us, the first step was getting started with the online platform. We knew that we need something to host this experience. So I was the first engineer of this company, so I started writing code and built the platform from scratch, but we didn't spend too much time on it. So I spent maybe 10 weeks building the prototype, and then we immediately started recruiting students. That was in June 2019, and that was through Jin's personal network. And from there, it became an iterative process of building technology to make things work better and adding more students and mentors and just talking to them and building anything that, you know, was needed at the time.
Okay, great. Wow, such a fast starting of your company. And then so like, what made you want to start your own company?
I think for me, I've always just been really in love with teaching. I actually teach French and literature here at Stanford as part of my PhD training. And I've always been interested in wanting to be in education. And so when Janusz came along and sort of like when we talked about this idea, the idea of sort of being in education and in ed tech, making a real difference and touching the lives of more than just one classroom of students was super appealing to me. And business is a completely new and foreign industry to me, and I was trained as a bookworm. So it was also really exciting, and I decided that I'm young, I have the time, I should just really dive into it and see how it goes. And so that was sort of my own impetus, and Janusz can share.
Yeah. So for me, I actually wanted to start a company. I've been like that for a couple of years. I found that starting a company is an amazing thing because you can really see it grow under your hands. And if you go and work for a big company, it's a wonderful thing, but it means that even if you put in twice as much effort as others, that it might not make a huge difference. But when you're working on your own company, you can really accelerate. And I also had this interest both in teaching, education, as well as technology. And I found that by starting an ed tech company, I could really combine these interests and just go with it. So I think for me, this was just a very natural thing to move forward with.
I think that was a very inspiring question for students to hear about what drove you guys. And I guess it'll be easy now for many of the students to think about what drives them to potentially create their own company. In that vein, we also want to hear about the biggest challenge that you faced on your journey to creating Polygence, because we've heard a lot of the good, but we also, we want to know some of the challenges that come along with being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess one thing I didn't mention in our brief introduction is that Polygence is actually very committed to social equity and to educational equality and access. And so I've been both Janusz and I have been really working really hard to make sure that we have a scholarship program where we have our pro bono arm, where we offer our services for free for communities and for students from backgrounds where they aren't able to afford the experience. And so I think one of the biggest challenges for us has been sort of thinking about how to balance the two sides of the company, as well as how do you drive growth while making sure that we're maintaining our core values and serving the communities that we also deeply care about. And so that has been something that is challenging, but also I would say one of the most rewarding aspects of working on something like Polygence, where there's obviously a business side of it, but also a really strong social mission.
Yeah, and for me, I think the biggest challenge was the evolution of roles. So as I mentioned before, I started coding, and initially I was an engineer, writing code and making sure that the platform worked. But as you start growing, you also have to start onboarding people, whether it's students or mentors. So suddenly you are back in your shoes as an educator, and then gradually you need more engineers on board, and you start learning about hiring and managing other people. And then at some point you have to start doing accounting, because obviously there is a lot of things you have to pay attention to. So I felt that my role was evolving every 3 to 4 weeks, and just that sort of challenge was something that was daunting, but it's also what makes it a lot of fun and fast-paced and extremely exciting.
Yeah, okay, that totally makes sense. And similar to that, do you have any regrets when you're thinking about how you worked on creating the company, or anything that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think one thing that I guess we could classify as a regret is that when we first got started, when we were first trying to get students, we sort of didn't really select for students who were particularly, high caliber or very independent students. And because we were just looking to get more students, that was sort of our mentality. But as we've grown, we've really started to become a lot more selective and a lot more, we have a lot more criteria in our minds as when we interview students and when we think about who would be a good fit for our program and who would really benefit the most from our program. And in business and in startups, sort of this kind of thing is called iterating, right? As you learn, you sort of tweak small things and change the way in which you approach certain problems. And so it's sort of natural that there's a growth curve like that. But I guess if we had to say something, that would be one thing that I wish we had done a little bit earlier.
And just to kind of follow on what Jen said, obviously we work with extraordinary mentors. So if you don't put the right student in front of, say, a Stanford PhD, obviously that can be a challenge.
Yeah, I definitely.
Oh, you froze a little bit, Rihanna.
Okay, I can just ask the next question then until she comes back. Okay, so the next 4 questions will be more to inspire the people here to hopefully start their own company one day. So like, and what they could do now to possibly get there. So like the first question would be, what work did you do before Polygence?
So both Janusz and I are academics by training. And so before starting Polygence, I mean, I was in my PhD program. I'm actually still in it. I'm just taking a leave of absence to work full time on the company. And we were both, I mean, very passionate teachers. We both taught a lot in our respective institutions. And so that sort of like laid the groundwork for our passion in education and the reason why we wanted to enter the space. And for myself, sort of, I did a lot of work with a education center in Hong Kong. I helped, this is actually an English teacher of mine who was one of my most influential mentors, and she started her own education company, and I actually helped her get that off the ground back when I was a freshman in college. And so that was really sort of my work experience in the education area that really helped.
Yeah, so as for me, I was actually, as I mentioned, a quantum physicist. So I did research that was very much focused on building quantum computers. So nowadays you might hear about how quantum computing is coming of age. And it wasn't directly relevant to what I'm doing now, but I really challenged myself and learned a lot about technical things. And obviously, in order to start a tech company, you have to understand technology. You have to be you have to understand how technology can help you scale things. And I think in that respect, my training as a physicist was helpful, not only in terms of training me as an educator and academic, but also making me understand the limitations and the possibilities within technology.
Okay, great. And for the next question, I just realized that we only have 9 minutes left in the meeting because it's going to end. So I think we're going to stop the interview portion now and go to the questions. And if we have a little extra time, we can go and try and do as many other questions as we can. And then hopefully Rihanna can come, or she's figuring it out. Her Wi-Fi went out. So, okay, we're going to start by answering the questions in the chat. Okay, the first question was from Connor. How has the environment of your company and workplace changed as it grew and you added more people?
I think this is a, oh, sorry.
Jen,
okay.
Please go.
I think this is a really wonderful question, especially because we added our first few employees right as COVID hit and right as California went into shelter in place. So that was actually a very interesting experience where, I mean, we're a remote learning company, so we're already, you know, really bullish on online learning and online stuff. But it was very interesting how we added employees that we'd never met, or maybe we've only met, you know, maybe a few times in person, and having to navigate sort of working with multiple people online. That has been a very challenging, but I think also really fun and rewarding given that we're in online learning.
Okay, and then the next one from Anya. What is or has been your process of brainstorming throughout the journey to start Polygence?
So just so I understand, is the question about the earliest stages of starting the company and the idea?
Anya, can you explain more?
Anyway, so, the brainstorming was really, so in order to start a company, you have to have some kind of insight, right? If it's an idea that any, I don't know, scriptwriter could come up while, writing a new movie script for Netflix, chances are it's not a very good business idea because you have to understand the space. You have to have a special angle and insight in order to really have a competitive edge. So for us, the brainstorming was really around the space we understood well, which was academia and mentoring and education. And since we understood it well, we understood what the problems were and how people function in it, we were able to brainstorm and come up with what turned out to be an idea we could really go with.
Okay. And then, okay, this is an interesting question. How did you come up with the name Polygence?
I love this question. I'm really glad someone asked that. So poly is sort of like the root for many, or like multifaceted. And GENS is meant to evoke intelligence, so multifaceted or multi-intelligence, just because we work on subject areas all the way from STEM, fine arts, social sciences, all the way to sort of the humanities. That's something that really encapsulates what we do.
Okay, and then could you tell us a story about your entrepreneurial process that inspired you to continue in the journey?
So in terms of inspiration, everything we do, it has its challenges, but when we get positive feedback from students, it really makes you want to wake up in the morning and get to work. So for us, the inspiration really comes from having users who love what you do. And by the way, if you want to start a business, you have to have a great product that people love and engage with, even when you are a small early stage company, because initially you cannot compete with, say, Google or some of the biggest companies that offer these polished and amazing products. But if you really provide value to the right people, they will still stick with you and love what you do, and that will be the ultimate source of inspiration.
I just want to say I'm so sorry, my Wi-Fi cut out, so I kept unjoining and rejoining the meeting. But our next question is, what is the most important piece of advice that you would give to a student in high school who wants to start their own company?
I think for me, the thing that I wish I had heard more is to not be afraid to take risks, because I'm in general a very risk averse person, and I want to just walk the path that's the safest. And do what I've always been good at, which is school, and just stick to that. But I think having a healthy dose of risk taking, and which is basically an entrepreneurial spirit, is really important. And I think training yourself to develop that, and also to train your curiosity to really open your eyes, look around the world. What problems are you excited about, and what problems are you best suited to think about of solving, would be my advice.
Yeah, I would say two things. One of them is that you really, in order to do something, like a company, I think there has to be at least one space that you understand particularly well, where you are the ultimate expert. And it really doesn't matter whether you are in education, academia, or finance. You have to understand things really from the inside in order to come up with a great idea and execute. And the other thing is that I never realized how much network matters until I started the entrepreneurial journey. Our first lawyer and accountant and the early mentors and even the early students and the first employees, everything came in through our personal networks. So, and building relationships takes time. So to go out there, talk to people, make friends, meet the right people, and going to events once the coronavirus is over, I think that's super important. And you are at the right place, obviously, in the Bay Area for this.
For sure.
Okay, I think the next question is really great, especially with how much growing you've already done in the past year. So like, what are some of the longer term goals for the company, and what do you think the next step is for you guys?
Yeah, so the long-term goal is to be able to impact as many students and help them do project-based learning. We really feel that this is the mission of this company, because learning is very often constrained by what the school is able to offer. I mean, every school is doing a great effort, but obviously there will be limits. And so we really hope to widen the impact. Also, in order to make that happen, we have to kind of create this ecosystem of mentors, students, a community, a technology platform, and keep refining it.
Thank you so much for that. We have one more final question. So I'm sure that starting a company probably means sacrificing a lot of things, but a student is wondering, what is something you have to give up or put to the side to dedicate yourself to creating Polygence?
I have a lot to say about this. So as I mentioned, it was my second year of my PhD when Janos and I decided to start this company. And I was in the middle of, preparing for my qualifying exams, where I had to read 120 books and do like an oral in front of my PhD committee. And so thinking about sort of like, okay, do I want to put my PhD aside and do Polygence full time and see where it goes, was a very, very big decision for me. And I decided to do it because the PhD can always wait, but with entrepreneurial things, if you miss the chance, you miss the chance. So that was sort of like my rationale. And also like what I said before about risk taking, this was a really great learning experience for me to really just dive into it and take the leap of faith.
And for me, I was an academic, and I had the option of continuing and becoming a professor. And my supervisor was encouraging to do that. But I decided that I would be happy to sacrifice that if I'm able to do something that I was hoping would have a big impact. This project-based focus, this kind of what I'm thinking of this as a new kind of learning and giving high schoolers opportunities that they may not otherwise have. I mean, you guys at NUAV have wonderful, wonderful opportunities, obviously. But we also work with students who might not be at the zip codes, or for whom this might be a real game changer. So for me, it was worth the sacrifice, but I did have to give up a promising academic community. So I'll pause here, and apparently there's another link we should all kind of copy from the chat and go to before.
Yeah, Zoom has a limit on meeting links. So everyone please click on that link that's in the chat and go ahead and join that Zoom.
See you guys.
Okay. Innovation in great products usually happens at the intersection of two disciplines. In your opinion, how is this true for your company?
Yeah, so I think what we are doing is innovating by introducing technology into a field which has traditionally not really been touched by technology. So obviously mentorship and academic mentorship in particular is not something that we invented, obviously, but kind of doing it in a scalable way where regardless of your interest, we are able to find you mentors just because we can have so many of them from all over the country. So for example, if you were interested in a specific area of protein folding, within biology, we are able to bring such mentors to you just because we have this technology platform which kind of eliminates the barriers that come with physical distance. And I think just taking this old-fashioned space of academic mentorship and bringing in technology, we are able to innovate and really have a very valuable value proposition that people recognize and understand and love.
I see we have another question from Daryl. He's wondering, when starting your company, what did you initially think the odds were that it would succeed? I see you laughing at that.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. I have some thoughts. So early on, so by the way, I would phrase this as advice to anyone thinking about starting a company, that I think what you have to consider when you start a company is what you're going to do valuable? Because if it is, then even if it just succeeds at some level, you'll be happy, right? So we thought that even if we just help 10 students do wonderful projects that they couldn't have otherwise done in school, because maybe a school is not offering a project in computational biology, or you cannot model the cosmic web of galaxies because the teachers might not have that sort of expertise, then I think we have succeeded. And I think doing something where every little thing you do is valuable, regardless of whether it becomes the next Google or Uber, that's like a very valuable thing. But I suppose the question was actually asking a more pointed question, which is like, how do you know if this is going to succeed at scale so that everyone can call it a success? And we thought that, there was a pretty good chance just because people were excited about what we were doing from very early on. But, we can answer this question from numerous angles. So I'll pause here. And if there's a follow-up question, happy to answer that.
I actually also think that, having the narrow definition of success be equal to becoming the next Google or Uber is not always the most helpful, even though obviously aspirationally, that's a great aspiration to have. And I think it's helpful for anybody who's starting off on this journey to have different definitions of what you would call success, and how, when you would feel like, okay, the product that I'm creating is adding value to society and to the lives of people. And I think that's an important sort of mentality shift to have.
I see we have another question. This one's from my mom. She's wondering, once you have an idea, what are the next 3 steps that you need to take in order to realize your dream?
Yeah, so I think one very important thing is to talk to many, many people about your idea. So very often people have this urge not to share their idea because they think that the idea is so valuable, and they feel like, oh, if I tell others, they will just take my idea and run with it. But the reality is that you have a lot of ideas and you have to have some early validation, because as you know, the founder of Dropbox, Drew Houston, said that the biggest danger is always building something and sinking a lot of energy into something that's not needed by the world. So I think you have to de-risk the idea. You have to talk to others, make sure that it's a good idea so that it's even worth investing a couple of months into it. And by talking to a lot of people, you can do that. So I would say that's step number one. Then you have to get some very early validation. If you are selling something that people are willing to buy it, if you are, you know, building something that takes a long time to build, you get some kind of interest from other parties. And then the third one is early execution and delivery. So some kind of minimal viable product, a very early prototype that you can ship really quickly, put in front of people and see that they indeed buy it, or they indeed want to get it, or, you know, take up the service and you know, have you deliver it to them. I would say.
And I think one of the greatest dangers too is that a lot of startup founders spend so much time, maybe even years, planning and trying to get the product perfect before putting it out to people. But that's often not the right attitude, because the best way to learn is to put your product or your service in front of people and then see how they react to it and learn from that, and then iterate and change.
So in our case, as I said, we built the platform in like 10 weeks. It didn't have many, it had very few features. You could basically have a chat conversation with your mentor and hop on a Zoom. That was it. But we had something that we could get started with and then add gradually more and more and more features.
Okay, great. And then further on this note of like getting started, how did you get the word out about your company, and what did you first do to get students to join in?
Very good question. And here's where Janos's point about network effect is super important. So at the very beginning, we got almost all of our students from my own personal connections in Hong Kong, my connections with schools, family, friends, and then slowly through word of mouth, those students told their friends. And then we also worked with a number of college counselors in the US who then told their students about us. And so really just mobilizing all the networks you have, all those family friends that you haven't talked to for many years. I went and pinged them on Instagram, on Facebook, on email, on text. You have to sort of be relentless in sort of mobilizing your network and trying to see who's willing to help spread the word out for you. And you'd be surprised, like a lot of aunties and uncles that I hadn't talked to for many years were actually really excited about the idea. And that relationship was also rekindled through me starting Polygence. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think this question by Connor, right? Like, I think it's a very insightful question, because early on when you build something and launch it, what meets it is silence, right? People don't know about you. You expect, oh, this will be this overnight success, but that's not what happens. There is no inbound message. You have to like go out there and, like, as Jin said, get the word out yourself. So you have to hustle like crazy, go to conferences, you know, grab people by the collar and say, look at this, what do you think, right? And gradually, as you get more and more users, people learn about you and you establish a brand, and then you start to get more inbound requests, not just, you know, you going out there and hustle. But I think the first part is really important.
For sure.
All right, well, we just want to thank Jin and Yana so much for taking time out of their day to come speak to the Nueva community. We so appreciate all your time and energy that you put into this, and this was a really inspiring and super informative experience, so thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think there's actually one more question.
Oh, okay, I'll do my spiel again. Okay, Amrita says, early on, did you use personal money on company costs, or did you take investments?
Yeah, so I suppose we were very fortunate, again, in this respect, that we were starting from fertile ground. So early on, we were supported by MIT Sandbox Innovation Fund. So MIT has this kind of its own incubator, which gives out up to $10,000 to students. It's essentially free money. They don't take equity in your company. They just give you money so you can test your idea. And we were fortunate to get one of those early grants, which is obviously not enough for you to live in Silicon Valley for a year or so, but this covers some of the costs and you can get started. And so MIT was great in that respect, supporting us. And we were able to use some of this early money to kind of build the platform and get a few users. And early on, we had revenue. So, for us, it was very important to early on kind of verify that this business is viable, that the service, people find the service very valuable. And even if you don't have like that a decade of track record, people are still very willing to engage with your mentors and work with you. So early on, we also started to have a revenue stream. But I think, ultimately, in order to scale any business, you have to be mindful of just delivering the right quality of service and getting the right people on board, and not just like immediate profitability. So it does make sense to take, for many businesses, it makes sense to take investment. And that's what we ended up. We partnered with very socially minded and very mission conscious investors who were in it for the long-term goal, and kind of wanted to see this grow over the coming years into a great product. And we ended up engaging with those investors, and obviously their support is crucial to our mission and the project itself. And any other questions about this? I don't know how much time we have here.
Yeah, maybe if anyone else has any questions, go ahead and drop them right now. We'll maybe take one more. Or alternatively, if someone wants to like raise their blue hand, if you'd rather speak rather than take your question, we'll maybe wait like a few seconds.
But we also want to wrap this up soon because we all have to get to a grade meeting. Yeah.
All right.
So.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I think Jen quickly like shared her email, but maybe we'll also drop our emails here in the chat. Oops, I can't seem to be able to type
I can
here.
put Janus's email.
Yeah. So just wanted to say that obviously we are a company that's all about mentorship. So if you ever find yourself thinking about starting a business and you are like, oh, I recall we had this, session at Nueva and they said something, but I'm still wondering what they exactly meant. Just, reach out. Like that's part of the advice we gave you. Just use your network.
Totally.
The people you get to know, just shoot us an email. Chances are you'll get a reply pretty quickly. Okay. So we love to talk to motivated and bright kids like, students like yourselves. So just reach out and we'll chat.
And don't be afraid. Number one advice.
Yes, you talked a lot about making connections, and now all the Nueva students at this meeting have the connections to Polygence.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
Thank you again. Thank you so much. We so appreciate this. And Isabel and I have really enjoyed working with you guys, and hope to work with you guys in the future. And I'm sure every single person who attended this meeting really enjoyed it and got a lot out of it.
And thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully to see you next month. We have a great speaker lined up. If you want to look, a little preview, they're the founder and CEO of Recurly. And we'll also have an exciting opportunity for everyone on the email list that we'll tell you guys about later. So if anyone's not on the email list, we sent out an all school email with a form to sign up. That would be great if anyone wants to come and sign up so you get the more info and earlier notice on our future speakers. And everyone, just thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. October 20th is our next speaker. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.